Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell-Rhodes.
Hey there, superstars. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining another episode that's designed to help you better lead at the top of your game. Now, in full disclosure, I have perfectionist tendencies, and I always have, to be honest with you. And while it serves me well in many instances, it sometimes is my Achilles heel when I'm leading teams. The gremlins in my head tell me that no one can accomplish the task better than me or exactly how I like it, which causes me to avoid delegating tasks to others altogether. However, I've learned over the years that delegating is an essential competency of great leadership because it empowers others to use their strengths to shine in a very impactful way, and it also frees you up to focus your energies on higher priority projects. And our guest today goes deep on the psychology behind delegation and how we as leaders can get out of our own way to better serve both ourselves and others. And on today's show, I'm honored to have Joyel Crawford, who's the founder and CEO of Crawford Leadership Strategies, a global leadership and career consultancy. She was recently awarded for the second time as one of the best career coaching services in Philadelphia, and she's also the host of the Career View Mirror podcast. Her career advice is also featured in Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, Essence, and Newsweek. So be sure to listen into this great episode, but stay tuned for just 2 minutes after the episode to listen to my closing segment called Karen's Take, where I share a tip on how to use insights from today's episode to further sharpen your leadership acumen. And now, enjoy the show. Hey there, superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to today's episode. I am absolutely thrilled and super excited to have a very dear friend, a sorority sister, and just a leadership extraordinaire. We have on today's show Ms. Joyel Crawford, who is the founder and CEO of Crawford Leadership Strategies. And when I tell you that she has a ton of gems and thoughts and ideas for us, you better believe it, as you will soon find out. So welcome to today's show, Joyel.
Thank you, Karen. It's so good to be here.
It is so awesome to have you. And in full transparency, listeners, I early in the podcast game, Joyel invited me to be part of her. Actually, it was a TV show and podcast together. And it was one of my very first experiences, and she made it so enjoyable. That was one of the reasons that I felt comfortable with launching the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast here, years later. So I just want to publicly say thank you, Joyel, for that inspiration.
You're welcome. You were a great guest. We had a lot of fun.
We did. Lots of laughs. Yes. I still remember that. Yes. Well, before we get down into the nitty gritty, for as much as you feel comfortable, I would love for you to share with the audience a bit more about your personal background. So maybe where you grew up, a little bit about your educational and professional journey, and then we'll get to talking about leadership.
All right. Well, I grew up in a small city called Plainfield, New Jersey. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It is in central Jersey. Central New Jersey, even though people don't think that there is a central New Jersey, there is. I grew up there, was born and raised, went to an undergraduate school called Elon University. It was Elon College at the time, and then got my MBA at Fairleigh Dickinson University in Madison, New Jersey. The highlight of my professional journey was spending 18 years. It was my first big girl job in corporate America, working for a telecom company, very large telecom company, probably never heard of it. And throughout my career, I worked in leadership and executive development, equal employment and affirmative action, employee relations, staffing, professional mentoring, and learning and development training. And I was a manager of management and employee development, and I was in charge of the leadership development program for over 30,000 employees. That's, to me, I feel like one of the biggest highlights throughout my career.
That is amazing. And I know how hard that can be. I mean, it's challenging and exciting, but I know how hard it can be because I was, as you know, was in a similar role when I worked at Microsoft, and we had thousands of employees in our programs as well. So it's exciting, but there is never a dull day, I must say. I don't know if you experience that as well.
Yeah, it's always a thing. And I'll just come out and say it. I was working at Verizon. It was a tiny, it was Bell Atlantic Mobile when I started. And then it became Verizon Wireless, and now it's Verizon. So it's like huge, it grows. But like, as I was growing professionally, the organization and the company was growing. It was just an interesting experience to see, the transitions of so much stuff and how learning and development like flourished and grew along with it. It's just a very, very interesting experience. So,
and Joyel, when you reflect back on those times, I remember the bells. I mean, some of these Gen Zers probably were like, the what? The who?
Yeah. What?
I remember the bell days in telecom. And I remember the evolution of the telecommunications industry as well. And so people in like your position had to keep up with supporting the leaders through a ton of transition that was going on in the industry. I don't know if any pop up for you, but do you remember like any of the trends or some of the things that your leaders constantly struggled with and were like on the, calling you on speed dial, like, hey, can you help me with this, that, and the other? What do you remember from those days?
Everything was on fire. Like, it was like always an emergency,
Right.
always. And as the company was rapidly growing, there was constantly huge, rapid hiring, where I would go to certain call centers and we'd have these hiring bonanzas, like where we would just have like people wrapped around buildings, interviewing to fill up call centers. I mean, those were huge, that was where I was constantly being pulled across the country to help open up call centers and interview the voices that, customers would end up hearing on the other line, and being able to have the honor to train them was phenomenal. But the thing that I kept hearing the most throughout all of the different types of roles that I had was all about effectively communicating with their team members. Leaders would call and they're like, I'm having this trouble kind of getting this person to understand where I'm coming from, or how do we communicate this change to the whole organization? And so I would be pulled in to help, communicate, again, relocation packages and transition. So it was always transition and communication that I found were key things that they were always tapping us for. And I love training. So I love educating other people. So I had no problem just rolling up my sleeves. My other colleagues were like, I'd rather put a hot pin in my eye than get in front of people and talk. So I would just take their assignments and go and run with it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And, one of the, I'll just say, sister competencies to communication is delegation.
Absolutely.
Because when you're having to, delegate and keep tasks on track, if you will, it involves clear and communication, clear, direct communication. And I know that's a interest and passion of yours that leaders are struggling with all the time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that whole quagmire when leaders are having to, delegate, and they're dependent upon either their recs or team members, whether they be in person or virtual, to get work done. What are some of the dynamics that you see with that?
Well,
in the area of delegation?
Oh yeah, I tell this really funny story in my book, Show Your Ask, right? And I talk about delegation, and one of the biggest things that I see come up is it's a control issue. the reason why most leaders resist delegation is because they're like, I could get it done faster myself, right? That's a control issue. And so the biggest challenge is letting go of that control. And I mean, I always use myself as the perfect example. Early on in my managing in the role of management and employee development, where I was in charge of all those leadership development programs. And so the head of HR and the head of learning and development came to me at the same time. So then I was like, oh my God, what's going on? I'm in trouble. And they were like, we want you to design a engaging event for our whole entire HR organization. It's going to be in two sessions. It's going to be in the spring and one in the summer. And we want you to create this huge engaging thing that really pulls in business acumen and sales and all of these things that I really wasn't really strong in. And we're going to give you a team of people that are going to develop and design it. And it just go with it, Joyel. Just go with it. And I was like, okay. And I knew this was a big deal, but I wanted to make sure I looked like a big deal. And so I had this wonderful team, and we laid out all of the processes, and we had raffles and giveaways and all these people and mentees, these people that were kind of coming up to me and asking me to mentor them. They wanted to be involved. So I pulled them in, and we all knew what our roles were, and get to the first session, and it just went sideways. Like stuff was going sideways. And I remember the head of HR looking at me, and she goes, this isn't looking good, Joyel. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I was taking on everything. I was handling the sales slips weren't right. So I'm running around handing out all the sales slips, and all the people were just standing around looking at me running around like a chicken with my head cut off because I wasn't speaking to them. I wasn't delegating any of the tasks to them or trusting them with doing the tasks. So at the end of that horrendous first session, the head of learning and development was just like, so that was an interesting event. What are you going to do so to ensure that it's a little smoother next time? And I had already had my plan, and I was just like, I'm going to use the team the way I need to use them. So we talked about it. We had a kind of a post-mortem conversation about what went on. Most people, the people that I had signed to certain tasks, were enjoying themselves. They were drinking wine and having a good old time. So they had forgotten their roles. And so I said, let's review what our roles are during this next event. And I need you all to help me because I don't ask for help. So if you see me drowning, step in and do something, or tell me, hey, this is it. I got this. This is my job. And so I was able to communicate that and let go of that control. And the next session was wildly successful. People still had a good time at the first session, but the people who were, kind of in the background, they were like, this is a train wreck. But it turned out to be an amazing second session because I gave up control. Everyone knew what their roles were. I trusted that they knew what they were doing. I would check in with them regularly, and we were all successful in the process. And I owned up to it. I was transparent about my weaknesses. My weakness is not giving up control. So I'm going to need you to tell me to stay in my lane. And so that's the whole thing with delegation, is to to yourself be true. Like, you've got to be true to who you are as a leader and know what your weaknesses and your strengths are, and be willing to give up a little of the tight reins that you have so that you can enjoy yourself too. I had a little glass of wine at the event that time on the second go round. So it was nice to be able to just release some of that controlling McTrollison kind of thing that you have on hold. And that really helps with delegation. That makes it work.
Oh my gosh, there's just so many nuggets in that. And it's something that we all struggle with, right? Because when our names or reputations are on the line, it's hard to become vulnerable and put your success in the hands of those that you're working with. And I have seen to the extreme, delegation to the extreme, where people delegated so much and weren't involved that they couldn't effectively lead,
Right.
because they didn't know who was on first and who was on second. But what I saw that was different in your story is that you communicated to your team made sure every single person understood their role. So you all had that initial conversation, and then you had a a better comfort level to see how it played out. Am I
Yes.
way off base,
No,
or
you were. Yes.
what are your thoughts?
Yes. It was fantastic. And what's really cool is that it was such a success that other departments came in and said, we want to use this for our team builders, for our departments. How did you do it? And so I was able to give them that blueprint and give them the heads up. Make sure you delegate and you're clear with your teams so you don't have the same thing that happened to me happen to you. And it became like this wild, huge, cool project, a program that rolled out to different departments, and it was great success. So,
Oh, that's so amazing. Well, that was a nice entree into your book. And I show your ask, of which I have a copy. I must say, I'm going to purchase it.
yay!
It's wonderful. But if you can share with the audience a little bit about why you wrote the book, Show Your Ask, and maybe a quick overview or a teaser for what is contained therein and how it can be beneficial to them.
Well, and thank you for helping me plug my book. I wrote it because everyone throughout my career, throughout the 18 years, and actually, I've been in business for 9 years as a consultant, but everyone always asks me, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? And every step of that way, I was asking, or I was advocating for myself and my career. And so I wanted to put all of these nuggets of knowledge and things where I showed up for myself in a book so that it could help other people. And it also gives you an opportunity to kind of sit back and reflect on how these lessons I learned impact your life and how you can apply them in your life and your career as well. How do you speak up in an interview? Like, how do you really, strongly position yourself for that next role or promotion? How do you negotiate for yourself? What happens if you lose your voice? What can you glean from that experience? So there's a whole bunch of things. The delegation story is in there, and how to delegate appropriately. So there's all these little tips and tools throughout the course of your career, whether you're new to your career or in the middle of it. These are all life lessons learned that you can apply and take actionable steps in advocating and speaking up for yourself and showing your ask, ASK, versus the other alternative.
Yes. You're so right. You're so right. And, I'll just say, and this is a moment of vulnerability for myself, I will say I felt extremely comfortable in a corporate environment showing my ask. I don't know exactly why, but when I switched to founding a firm and then dealing with clients directly, because I was the executive at one point that vendors and partners wanted to talk to and be with, and then being on the other end of the coin, trying to make sure we were top of mind when companies needed services. It was a whole different space for me. And so I'm curious, with all the great knowledge and stories that you wrote about in your book, how has it been? How has it been showing your ask when you founded Crawford Leadership Strategies?
Ooh, let me tell you, when you say your own brand versus an internationally well-known brand, and people are like, "What's a Crawford Leadership Strategies?"
Yeah, exactly.
What?
They know Verizon and they know Microsoft, but they're like, okay, now who are you?
Yeah, like to work under the guise of that brand, and then to go in and tell, I'm all proud of it, because I'm, you're the founder, and then people are like, I know what is that, and it's a little humbling to not have the shine of that well-known brand. And so it took a while for me to not feel like I didn't deserve to be in these rooms and these spaces and places. Yeah, I may not be a multi-billion-dollar company yet, but you want to work with me because I have experience in working with folks and skills and things that I developed for those multi-billion-dollar organizations, right? So
Sure.
I have the experience. I may not have the brand recognition yet, but you want to work with me because I have the experience. And so in showing my ask, I would share my journey. I worked for 18 years and this is what I did. And this is what I love to do. I love growing leaders for a living. And this is how I do it. And people really started to connect with my why. And so when I'm showing my ask, I set this intention of collaboration and support instead of, I need to get a client. I need to get a client. That negative energy, almost like when we were dating, back in the day with Karen, when we were like going out and trying to get dates and get the numbers and give our numbers
Right.
out. And I was thinking to myself, who needs my help in this room? That was a different mindset shift from, I need to get the clients, I need to get the clients. And showing my ask was, how can I help support you? What do you need help with in your organization? And when I changed it from getting to giving, it changed me showing my ask. That whole perspective changed. Networking wasn't hard anymore because it was more of, who needs my help today? How can I help them?
Love that. Absolutely love that. Also, as you know, I wrote the book Lead at the Top of Your Game, and in that we talk about a lot of leadership tactics and approaches to really up your game when you're executing as a leader. And what I love to always ask our guests is, out of the seven that we wrote about, that the research said were the top most critical ones, was there one out of the seven that resonated or stood out for you?
Yeah, the strategic decision making really
Oh, tell
stood
me
out to
more.
me.
Why is that?
I didn't know it at the time, but I was coaching people from probably for about 15, 16 years while I was at Verizon Wireless and beyond. And I thought about it, that there's a process that I would walk people through whenever I was dealing with leaders, leading their teams better or what have you. And it's a methodology called RISE. And it's reflecting, identifying, strategizing, and executing. And I would walk them through this, not knowing that I was helping them rise to the next level, to the next position in confidence in, once they've gotten some type of performance evaluation that they didn't like. But I think strategic decision making is such a key skill set for us to walk our leaders through. And I, unbeknownst to me, was planting those seeds and helping those leaders strategically make those decisions by first reflecting on what the situation is, identifying what skills or tools they needed in order to be more successful. Then let's strategize a plan on how we're going to lay that out. What steps are we going to take to make sure that, an example of somebody getting a below average performance rating, what are we going to do in order to make sure that never happens again? What steps are you going to take? And then let's execute. Let's take some action. So I would hold the people that came to me, all my strategic business partners would come to me, let's execute. So I kept them accountable. What date are you going to get this done by? When are you going to follow up with me? When are you going to follow up with the person that interviewed you? So I was helping them rise through each of those different seasons within their career without even knowing it. But now I just put an acronym to those steps. And I really think that is so key when you are leading a team or even just leading yourself. Sometimes you just got to take a step back and rise to get the energy to deal with the team or the problem child or whatever it is that you did, the relocation or the unfortunate, with strategic, what are we calling them now? When we're changing, what do we call them? Restructuring,
Oh,
reorg.
yes. Restructuring, realignments, reorg.
So
You
I'm
pick
trying to
a
think of the
term.
pretty word for layoff.
Right.
We always had to paint nice pictures over like
We
such yucky
did.
situations. I'm like, what was it called? Oh, a
That's right.
restructuring. Yes.
Restructuring.
So yeah.
Yes.
So the strategic decision making is it's not a soft skill. It's a hard skill. It's a power
It
skill.
is.
And that really struck me as one of
Yeah.
the super skills that you outline in your book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And, I would be remiss if I did not also plug your show, Career View Mirror.
Oh,
So, you all, if you don't know about it, you better Google it and learn about it because it is awesome. And you've had so many fantastic guests on there. And I'm just
you.
curious, Joelle, if thank you. I paid her to say that. No. But I mean, you've talked and heard so many stories with your guests. And I'm just curious, and if you don't have an answer for this is fine. But I'm just curious if you're seeing anything different these days that your guests are struggling with their careers than pre-pandemic. Is there
Mm.
anything big now of what they're having to deal with versus what some of the trends that you heard, previously?
I think a lot of my clients tend to feel more comfortable revealing some of the microaggressions that they've been
Mm.
dealing with.
Mhm, mhm.
For some reason, the pandemic has kind of awakened a lot of different types of behaviors that may have been kind of underlying and kind of not really seen, nefarious, but now people are kind of wide open about
They
how they
are.
feel and think, and that's fine, but
Mm.
I say this all the time: freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. And so helping them manage through those microaggressions, but also I think instead of the great resignation, I'm noticing a great kind of realization. I think a lot of my clients are realizing that their talents and skills may be used elsewhere or could be appreciated in different fashions, and so helping them come up with a job search campaign or articulating their skill sets. That seems to be those seem to be the two big things that I'm hearing a lot of is taking all of my transferable skills and how can I move them someplace else because I feel like my value is not being respected where I am, but also how do I deal with somebody who is just I really feel like they're really out to get me. And I'm like, well, there are steps, let's go back to the HR fundamentals here, really working in a civil workplace, those types of things and how to manage those relationships and communicate with micromanagers and things of that nature are things that I've been seeing a lot more of than
These days.
than pre-pandemic.
You know what? You're spot on that because I spoke at a global talent summit at Gallup a few months ago, and we were discussing the shift right now with of companies focusing more on skills versus degrees. Not that they don't appreciate or lessen the value of degrees, but because of the way the industries have been changing across the world, especially with the advances in technology, companies are really focused on those most critical skills that are needed within their company and industry versus a mandate that you have to have a degree in X, Y, and Z. So that whole focus on skills makes a ton of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Makes a ton of
And I
sense to
think a
me.
lot of things that I work with clients on is them realizing that they have the skills within them. I think that they get
Yes,
so entrenched in the day to day that they think that their skills are only useful where they are. And I even got
correct.
caught up in that when I left to start my business, like I was like, I only know how to do this here. But then I realized, no, you have skills and abilities that can translate to other functions and groups and industries. And so
That's
it's
right.
believing in yourself and really celebrating those skills and really highlighting them, your
And
accomplishments.
taking the leap to try it
Yes,
out,
yes,
right? Even if you have a fear of falling on your face, but just try it and
absolutely. Just
see.
try. You got to try. You don't know unless you try.
That's right. All right. Well, before I let you go, we got to do our final segment. It's called Full Disclosure. And I promise you there's no gotcha questions
Oh,
on
okay,
it.
okay.
But we like to just take a fun peek into some of the things you like to do or some of your preferences and habits. So my first question to you, Joelle, is what was your very first job ever out of high school? Well, it could be in high school,
My
but
very first job, yeah, because I did have a job before high school, and it was babysitting, and I didn't know it at the time, but I had like a little like babysitting racket going on. Like, it was like a babysitting a couple kids down the block and accumulating a lot of wealth. That was like in eighth grade, and I used to have a schedule and have my own checking account and everything. Like that was pretty big time. So I would say I was an entrepreneur at the very beginning. I guess caregiving is in my blood. So
it sounds like it, definitely. All right. My next question is let us analyze what would be your ideal meal. So first, what is your favorite appetizer when you go
my
out to
favorite
eat?
appetizer when I go
Uh-huh.
out, I have to think about this because it's been a minute since I've been out a lot, like we're still kind of creeping
Yes,
out. But I
we
would
are.
say I absolutely love a charcuterie board, meats
Oh,
and
yes.
cheeses and all the little, the gherkins and then the little fancy
Oh,
almonds. Yeah, I
making me hungry.
love a good charcuterie board.
Uh, all right. What is a favorite entree? It can be,
Entree.
yeah, anything.
I love seafood, so it's got to be
Me
anything
too.
crustacean like shrimp or lobster or both crab legs. Oh, you can't
Yeah.
tell me anything. Give me some good Alaskan crab legs and some
And you're
butter.
good to
I'm
go.
good to go.
All right. And finally, if you like dessert, what would be your favorite dessert?
Anything chocolate. So I
Uh,
love chocolate. I love chocolate.
do
Yeah,
you?
or
I think, go
or a
ahead.
good glass of wine. I would say that wine, when you said
That's,
appetizer, the first thing my
yes.
brain said was wine. I was like, that's
Yeah,
not a
me
real
too.
appetizer.
Well, we think outside the box here. We live outside the box. So it can be. It is for me because I don't like desserts that much.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm the only female on this earth that doesn't like
No,
chocolate.
no,
But
oh,
yeah,
that's okay.
but
What kind of what would your dessert be? Would it be a glass of wine? Or would it be?
it would probably either be a glass of wine or I would never order dessert on my own. I might like ask for a forkful
Yeah.
from my daughter or my husband.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were absolutely forced to eat something sweeter, maybe it would be a cheesecake, maybe.
Ooh, okay. So you're like my
Um,
husband. He loves cheesecake.
yeah,
I like the
that's
cheesecake that's
probably
not cheesecake, like the ones like a Cheesecake Factory that have like chunks of cookie or like peanut butter,
oh
like
yeah.
the very littlest bit of cheesecake, but with everything
Yeah,
else in there.
but there's everything else in there. No, I hear you on that. And actually, an ideal dessert for me would be cheese and crackers.
Ooh,
I'm a more
yes.
savory kind
So
of
so
gal.
like your appetizer for dessert. So
Yes,
that's I could do that too. I could eat
you could do that too.
charcuterie all day.
Well, we'll have to make a date one of these
Yes,
days. When we're back in the same
that would be
city, and we'll
fantastic.
definitely do that.
That would be fantastic. I would love that.
Well, thank you so much, Joelle, for your time today and for being on the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. We absolutely loved having you.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen.
Awesome. Well, listeners, hopefully I know you've enjoyed this episode because it has, in my opinion, been fantastic and one of our best episodes ever. We thank you so much for listening to us. Please feel free to like or subscribe the podcast on your favorite podcast platform of choice. Also, please share with a friend. I'm sure they could love some of the leadership nuggets that our guests provide as well. As we could use the additional listeners, we love to get our message out and give the gifts of knowledge out to those across the globe who are interested. Thank you so much again for listening and see you next episode. Bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today with Joyel Crawford, founder and CEO of Crawford Leadership Strategies. Links to her bio, her entry into our leadership playbook, and additional resources can be found both in the show notes on your favorite podcast platform of choice and on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. And now for Karen's take on today's topic of delegation. Now, as you all are aware, in my book, Lead at the Top of Your Game, I outlined the top 7 tactics related to optimal leadership execution. And did you know that delegation is one of the sub-competencies of the tactic of leading with a drive for results? Leading with a drive for results is all about your ability to be tenacious about achieving your goals, no matter if you have to pivot along the way. And if you're leading a team, your ability to delegate tasks appropriately to those with the skills to do a fantastic job can lead to the success or failure of your initiative. And I wanted to share with you a great tip from Harvard Business Review. It was a tool that I read called Practice Saying Yes, No, and Yes If. This is all about the art and science of being selective. It's not reasonable, realistic, or healthy to commit to every opportunity that comes your way. So I encourage you to be discerning with your time. Start by carefully assessing every demand that comes your way and cherry pick the asks which most align with your areas of expertise. You should say yes to these, but for those requests that don't quite align, you say yes if. And you follow the word if with your ask to them. Say yes if you are permitted to immediately identify other people to help accomplish the goals through their direct involvement. You may still consult with them, motivate them, and lead them, but you're going to be essential as the catalyst, but not as the muscle that's doing the heavy lifting to getting the task done. Now, if they say, no, they're not willing to allow you additional resources, then this might be the time that you say no as well. This discerning approach may mean delegating some tasks to others, right? Negotiating a reduction of your direct contribution, or just saying no altogether while making the business case for why your efforts and attention will have a greater impact elsewhere. So give it a try and let me know how it worked out for you by sending a note to me either on LinkedIn or at the email podcast@shockinglydifferent.com. And if you're listening to the show, you all know that we don't charge for the show, but it's not free either. Our only ask for you is an honor of a pact amongst us friends for you to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice and share with just one friend about the podcast. I think that's a great deal, don't you? Well, thanks again for listening and being part of our Lead at the Top of Your Game community, and see you next week. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.